Good morning, everyone. Morning. What a wonderful day to celebrate our Earth and our science. I'm delighted to welcome all science students, scientists, science enthusiasts, future scientists, and more importantly, citizens for science for our event. Science worth spreading. Also want to welcome our President Ed Ray and our former President John Burns and our Provost Ed Fazer and other distinguished guests like our Mayor Bill Traber. Again, it means really a lot to our faculty to see their support and appreciation for science. Also want to thank a lot of folks who are watching online with the live webcast that we are doing. So welcome to the online audience as well. Thank you again for spending part of Earth Day with us and for making time to celebrate science. I am Sastry Pentula, Dean of Science at OSU. I want to thank everyone in the College of Science team and our colleagues for creating and planning this event for science, and also for our sponsors, Oregon Academy of Science and the American Chemical Society. Thank you. Remember, we are just a small group among thousands around the world, from Portland to Washington, D.C., from Alaska to North Carolina, from London and Berlin to Sydney, who are champions and advocates for science today. I'm thrilled and inspired to see scientists and science supporters in over 600 cities celebrating science today. It is so very important, especially in these tense and uncertain times, to celebrate science, feel the impact of science, and advocate for science. Science helps advance society. It helps to enhance science education, helps to make research accessible, and most importantly, it helps to ensure that data and science inform public policy. Today's event is about three things. One, the incredible science that is happening at Oregon State. Number two, the meaning and value of science on our communities regionally, nationally, and globally. And finally, it's about science communication. I'm so proud to be a part of a community like Corvallis that embraces and celebrates science. My family and I really love this community that believes in science at Oregon State, and I know we are certainly talking to the choir or preaching to the choir here. This is a cause that is very near and dear to my heart. It is my life's work as well as my passion. In our college, we work to create a one science community, a strong, diverse, cohesive science community who are committed to working together to achieve a set of common goals that foster the academic, personal, and professional growth of all its members. No silos, no selfishness. Science at Oregon State is changing the world for the better. Our scientists are focusing on major societal challenges, whether it is mitigating the climate change, saving coral reefs, discovering new drugs to treat disease, neutralizing drug-resisting bacteria, decreasing air pollution, or maintain the integrity of our nation's census and survey data. Science and data, not alternative facts. Science and data are important for government to set policies. Again, data, not fake data, is how America knows what America needs. As US Census Bureau says, we count because you count. Second, the meaning and value of science brings to our communities regionally, nationally, globally is extraordinary. I always say, invisible science, impeccable impact. It may seem like fundamental science is at times invisible, but science is everywhere. Science makes the impossible possible. It is the foundation of so many things in our modern lives. Science helps us understand what is changing in our environment. Science helps us clean up our environment for a healthy planet and healthy people. Science is really where discoveries begin. Many people don't realize that they hold science in their hand every day, in their iPhones. There is so much physics, there is so much materials, there is so much chemistry, and mathematical algorithms go into these cell phones, GPS, Google Maps, etc. So when you stop and think about it, you can see science everywhere in your daily life. So at times, scientists pass the baton to engineers to finish the race or build the tools that we all enjoy. Fundamental science is the backbone of innovation, and the College of Science is the heart of any university. Finally, if science to have an impact, it must be communicated. As Alan Alda, founder of the Center for Communication Science, often says, communication is not something extra you add on to science. It is the essence of science. Science can unite us and offer inspiration and hope. But science needs you. It needs your help. Unless you value science, unless you advocate for science, unless you share science, we will not be able to solve our most pressing problems together for a better world. We need science to address problems together for a better world. Again, we need science to address the new challenges we face and to identify the fact from the fiction. The future of our nation relies upon inclusive, accessible, and well-funded scientific research and education. You pull the levers that elevate science. So join our conversation today and learn about the impeccable impact science on society and on your future and our future. I hope we will continue this dialogue between scientists and the public. If there's one thing for you to think about today, think about one way, just one way you can make a difference. Thank you again. Let's have now hear a message from our distinguished professor and Honorable Dr. Jane Lubchenco.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our special celebration of science. My thanks to Dean Sastry Pantula, Dean of OSU's College of Science, for his vision in creating science worth spreading, and to the OSU team and our colleagues at the Oregon Academy of Science and the American Chemical Society, who organized and sponsored today's events. I'm honored to open this celebration with a few remarks. My theme is a simple one. Science is a community endeavor, one that needs continual nurturing. If you ask most American kids to draw a picture of a scientist, guess what you'll get? Yep, a guy with frizzy white hair, working alone to uncover the mysteries of the universe. This stereotype will certainly be reinforced by what's likely to be a fantastic 10-part series about Einstein called Genius that is based on Walter Isaacson's book and due to premiere April 25th on the National Geographic Channel. But that iconic image, while true for a few scientists, is by and large not true of most scientists today. For one thing, scientists come in all ages, colors, genders, and sizes. For another, science today is very much a collaborative effort, both among scientists and more with the broader community of non-scientists. This codependence of science and society has produced life-saving results and enriched our lives immensely. Moreover, this mutually beneficial interaction is rich with potential, but only if we safeguard the vitality of that relationship. Scientists must respect and interact with society. Society must respect, value, and use science. And they can co-create and co-use knowledge. I feel so very lucky to live in a community that embraces science. It's one more thing I love about Corvallis. Speaking of which, have you noticed the subject of the new multimedia exhibit at the Corvallis Arts Center? The exhibit celebrates and explores microbiomes. Now, how cool is that? Science plus the humanities exploring the unseen but oh so important world of communities of microbes. I love that our Arts Center embraces the complementarity of the arts and sciences and routinely highlights their interconnections to the benefit of our community. Another indicator that Corvallis embraces science is our iconic festival. Lots of other communities have festivals that celebrate music, film, a flower, think lilacs or tulips, food, shrimp, seafood, or a heritage. Corvallis? Our best known festival is Da Vinci Days, where we celebrate science, technology, and the arts with a delightful combination of the serious and the silly, and a heavy dose of participatory, creative fun. To these long-standing Corvallis events, this year we also have today's Science Worth Spreading on Earth Day. Of course, Earth Day and a celebration of science are a natural partnership. Science has played a central role in helping us understand what's changing in our environment. Science has helped us clean up our air and our water and protect our health and safety. But society funded and used the science that produced those results. And now, as new environmental challenges emerge, science is again helping us sort out fact from fiction and providing both inspiration and hope. But make no mistake, science does not exist apart from society. It is nested within society. And unless citizens and their elected representatives value science, unless they help identify problems to solve and work on solutions together, and unless scientific information is widely available and used, science cannot provide the opportunities and the hope, the solutions and the inspiration we need. Science is not useful unless it is shared and used. We are fortunate in Corvallis to have both a supporting community and a wealth of talented scientists, engineers, and technology experts. But we do not exist in a vacuum. Those scientists depend on national and international programs to do and share their work. They depend upon national programs for resources to team up with businesses and communities to solve problems and track progress. Science takes more than a village. In many instances, it takes a nation. During my 4 years at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, I saw firsthand how vital the national role was in enabling both the discovery of new knowledge and the smart use of new discoveries in which science assisted society in sometimes subtle, sometimes dramatic ways, from providing timely weather forecasts and warnings, to creating jobs and restoring coastal habitat, to returning fisheries to sustainability and profitability. Many fisheries off our coast are very much in much better shape today than they were a decade ago, thanks in part to science, but also to great partnerships among fishermen, managers, and scientists. Again, that science-society connection. Keeping those fisheries and the communities that depend upon them healthy, despite the plethora of challenges underway in the ocean, will be a major challenge in the years to come. The ocean is becoming warmer, higher, more acidic, and it holds less oxygen. Storm tracks and ocean currents are changing. We cannot rest on our laurels, nor on outdated data. We need new data. We need both traditional and scientific knowledge. And we need new partnerships to chart a new path in these uncharted waters. Anyone who loves fresh fish and seafood, anyone who values the cultural heritage of our coastal communities and the mystery and the majesty of the ocean has a stake in ensuring we can meet these challenges. Comparable opportunities exist for science and society to partner around looming and interrelated energy, climate change, agriculture, water, and health challenges. Our success in all of these endeavors will depend upon whether science and society can continue the productive relationship they've enjoyed in past years. Our best hope is to strengthen the science-society connections that have benefited us in the past and renew our commitment to science serving society and society enabling science. Science is a community endeavor, one that needs continual nurturing, starting but not stopping here in Corvallis. With those brief remarks, I invite you to enjoy today's program. Thanks.
It's great to see you all. My name is Nick Houtman. I'm the editor of Terra Magazine at Oregon State, and I have the privilege of hosting the monthly Corvallis Science Pub. I think some of you have been to Science Pub. Show of hands, how many have been to the Old World Deli for a Science Pub or 2 or 10? Quite a few of you, so thank you. It's great to see you all here. I heard a speaker at a group of forestry students and managers and scientists a while back say, you know, it's up to you folks, pointing to the audience, to change the narrative. It's up to you to tell your story. That's what she meant by that. Write op-eds, letters to the editor. Get on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. Participate in public hearings. Let your voice be heard. Maybe even run for public office. Now, her point was that we should be bringing evidence and logic to these conversations that we have that are often driven by, well, if they're not alternative facts, certainly fear and emotion, and there's a role for that, right? We're all emotional people. We have concerns and we have emotional cues that help us guide our decisions, but science is a very powerful piece of evidence. It generates the information that we need to make decisions. You don't need to have science to make decisions. All the time people make decisions without science. But it's a very powerful and important source of knowledge for us. So we're here today to help change the narrative. You're going to hear from 6 scientists about their work, about what they do in their lives as well as their science. And then after they talk, we'll open up the conversation so that you can ask questions of them and find out a little bit more about perhaps things that you want them to explain, or perhaps you'd like to have them elaborate on about what it means to stand up for science. So our first speaker today is Sandra Loesgen, a chemist from the OSU Department of Chemistry. Her focus is on the chemistry of microorganisms and how they can apply to human health. She works on new antibiotics, anti-tumor, antiviral agents. And she wanted you to know that as a native of Germany, she likes to bake German cakes. I'm ready. I think any of you may be too. She likes to play volleyball and soccer. So please give a nice welcome to Sandra Loesgen. Please speak.
Is it on? Okay, good morning. Thank you, Nick, for the introduction, and thank you all for being here this morning. So it's Earth Day, right? And I thought I want to talk about the chemistry we find in nature and actually nature's pharmacy. So bear with me for just 7 minutes, and I want to walk you through some chemistry we've been doing and we've been excited for here at Oregon State. I don't have the clicker, I guess, but I think that will do. Okay. So you all might have seen boxes like that around, right? So these are 2 boxes of antibiotics. Penicillin on the top and a macrolactone antibiotic on the top, on the bottom here. And we all have been using them. These are antibiotics that are important, that help us combat infections against bacteria, and they have been doing this for over 60 years. Those molecules, if you're a chemist like me, you'll get excited for these structures, really complex structures. They've been around for such a long time and helping us to maintain health, to maintain wellness. As many of you might not know, these molecules are actually coming from microorganisms. So penicillin is derived from this fungus, and these macrolactone antibiotics, or these alkaloids there, those are made by bacteria. So these microorganisms are all around us, and they're making molecules. They have a dedicated enzyme machinery making those structures, and really, fortunately for us, we can use those as drugs. Those bacteria and fungi are all around us. They're all around here, and if you grab a little bit of dirt, a little bit of soil, and you put it out of such a plate, you see them coming up. There are millions of bacteria in there, and all of them are really, really good chemists. So the molecules you see there, those 2 molecules, one is from a fungus, one is from a bacterium. These together are our standard therapy for those red bacteria you see here on the bottom. Those are Pseudomonas aeruginosa. This is a gram-negative bacterium that's been really worrisome in the clinic, and we have a hard time defending us humans against those microbes shown here in red. Okay? And those microbes also, they get resistant to those molecules, and we need to look for more. We try to find new molecules all the time to stay alert and to maintain our health status. So there are good microbes on the top, on the left here, and then there's bad microbes on the bottom, and they're coming. The good microbes are all around us. So if you think about soil, and that's a Da Vinci quote, we have this famous Da Vinci days here, we know more about the movement of our celestial bodies than we know of the soil underneath our foot. And many of these microbes are underneath in the soil, and they're the chemists we are trying to engage in giving us drugs and medicines. So how good is the soil here in Oregon? Do we have good chemists here in Oregon? And that's a question my research group is addressing. And we went to Bend, Oregon. Beautiful place. If you haven't been, you should all go. And there is the high desert. And we took samples there from the soil, and we can bring out those bacteria and study the chemistry. 50% of those bacteria we found there are either antibiotically active or cytotoxic, so they could be used as an anti-tumor agent. 50%. That was a surprise. But you don't even have to go so far to Bend, Oregon. You just stay here in Corvallis, and you just go to Memorial Union. At Memorial Union, we found fungi that can also prevent those bacteria from spreading. You see here those zones of inhibition, very similar to the early work from Fleming, that show us these produce chemistry that we can use as new drug leads. And this is all done by work from OSU students. I have the names written down here. There are undergraduate students involved. There are graduate students involved. And if you see later on, we have a demo here from George that is nature's pharmacy. So we are here in Oregon, and we also have access to the ocean. And we heard Jane talk about, I would say we know less about the ocean than we know about the soil underneath. And this is an interesting perspective on our Earth. We are all the way down on the right corner. That's Oregon. And we put Hawaii in the center. I'm not sure why, but 70% of our Earth's surface is ocean. And in this ocean, we have microbes in the water, in the sediments, in plants, associated with plants and marine life. And we also want to look at them. Are they producing chemistry? Are they good for us? Can we exploit them and find new drugs? And one story we have is that we just recently started looking at the microbes that are associated with Pacific fish. It's very easy. We're just swapping those fish and we grow those bacteria. And again, we see a microbe here in those bar diagrams, the really green one, that seems to combat, to kill those pathogenic bacteria that we are worried about in the clinic. And again, this is work from OSU undergraduate and graduate researchers. So what can we do as a community? Well, we want to forwards. As a community, there's a really nice idea that started at Rockefeller University, an initiative that's called Drugs from Dirt. That's a link here online. And this was really successful. People in the whole US were sending small samples of their backyard soil back to the scientists, and they analyzed their chemical potential. And that's something we would like to do here at Oregon as well, here maybe at OSU, because we do have dirt, we do have sediments, we do have plants, and we have a really engaged research community and a lot of researchers that want to find the new antibiotics to maintain our health state. And with that, I thank you.
So, Sandra, one quick question, if you don't mind. Yeah. If you had a golden checkbook and could spend as much money as God on science, what might you do that with? What might you support? Where would you spend your dollars?
I would probably say mainly in education and access to those resources, yeah, to get those microbes in our hands and work with them. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next speaker will take us from a small world into a bigger world of populations. Brent Steel is a mathematician and a biologist, and he studies biological populations. He tells me that among his favorite creatures are moose and caribou, and that he has his favorite non-living thing is Gershgorin's circle. It's a theorem, pardon me. Gershgorin's circle theorem from mathematics that he says is very tattooable. So if you would like to have a tattoo that you can then use as a cocktail opener at a next party, talk to Ben. Ben?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so happy Earth Day, everyone. Does anyone recognize this? Yeah, so this is actually the first full-view photograph of Earth that was ever taken. It was taken in 1972 as the Apollo 17 mission left Earth's orbit, headed for the moon. And you know, in present day, when we can call up an image of almost anything that you could imagine, including satellite imagery, on a device that we hold in our pocket, it's easy to forget how recently none of that was possible. This was our very first selfie. And about 5 years after Apollo 17 launched, the Voyager probes launched, and their mission took them to the edges of the solar system and then into interstellar space. And the Voyager mission was a scientific exploration mission, and the Voyager also was supposed to serve as a time capsule, possibly for future humans. And then also the hope was that maybe someday the Voyager probes would be encountered by an extraterrestrial civilization. And it was a way of making contact. And so on the probes was this golden record that contained a map to Earth and instructions on how to build a record player so you could access the data on the record. And then the record itself contained greetings in many languages. It contained images, a sound of a kiss, a picture of someone eating a hamburger, music. There was Bach and rock and roll, Chuck Berry, and there was a greeting from then President Jimmy Carter that I'll quote in part. He said, "This is a present from a small and distant world, a token of our sounds, our science, our thoughts, and our feelings. We are trying to survive our time so that we may live into yours. And so the Voyager, I love that quote, and the Voyager probes for me represent what science is all about. It's curiosity, it's exploration, and it's using our ingenuity to try and survive and maybe even thrive. So Voyager continues to, Voyager 2 has left the solar system. It continues to sail through interstellar space. And meanwhile, back here on Earth, science has gone on. And we've gotten better and better at taking pictures of the Earth. So this is time-lapse footage from the International Space Station, looking down on the Earth from 250 miles above it. And when I look at this image, or this movie, I see sort of three layers. You can see just off on the side, you can see the solar panels of the International Space Station. And the space station, of course, is in orbit. So we've got this orbital system. And then below that, you can see the atmosphere. We've got weather happening, thunderstorms. And below that, we've got cities. You can see them laid out. And each of those layers, our scientific understanding is really at a different level. So orbital mechanics, Newton, we pretty much figured that out. The atmosphere, I think that atmospheric science is what I would call mature. Like weather reports aren't perfect, but they're not bad. And we sort of on a fundamental level understand how something like a hurricane works. By contrast, the cities below, we know there are so many open questions about cities, about how cities work. And those questions are increasingly important because the majority of the human population now lives in cities, and that proportion is rising and rising. And these cities represent these complex networks of human interactions. And these complex networks are these sort of bioreactors that fuel the spread of emerging pathogens, the emergence of ideas, art. They structure the way our microbiomes work in some cases. So it's increasingly important to understand the dynamics of cities. And that's something that my lab works on. And so one way to do that is, so here's a picture of Montreal from the International Space Station. And one way to think about how to understand the structure in this picture is to just think about how people move around. How do those networks sort of flow? And so this is Montreal if you sort of translate it into census data. So this is census data on the location of where people live and where they work. And the lines that you see in this picture, they're connecting home locations and work locations. And the thickness of the line tells you how many people travel that route to work. So those thick red lines, that's a commuting route that a lot of people do. And then the thin blue lines, relatively less people do that. So you see in this data, when you look at it, without doing any statistics, there's wonderful structure. There are these stars. And it may surprise you to know that we don't actually have a good model that explains this pattern. I mean, if this were an organism and it were sick, I'm not sure we would have a really good idea of how to heal it. The physiology of a city is far below, our understanding of that is far below our understanding of the physiology of a human being. But one thing we can do is look at cities of different sizes. And what we can see is that as cities become larger, they become increasingly organized. So as the cities become bigger, like that city on the right, we get more and more people traveling in the daytime to work in a few focal locations. What's even more mysterious, though, is that two cities of about the same size, so here we have Vancouver on the left and Calgary on the right, two cities of about the same size and geographic extent can have markedly different levels of organization that have emerged. So Vancouver, the movement patterns are really diffuse. And in Calgary, they're highly organized. Calgary is potentially like this amazing viral bioreactor. If a pathogen were to arrive anywhere in Calgary, the next workday would be funneled into the center to transmit and then broadcast back out. It could be potentially just a huge advantage. And crucially, it's actually really difficult to tell whether or not that phenomenon is happening in nature. You need to generate and metabolize a lot of high-volume census data. We need high-volume good disease data, and we need to find a way of putting those together. And so that's what we're working on. But what I want to emphasize here is the mystery of it. I mean, I love that Da Vinci quote, you don't have to go out into the universe, into interstellar space to find mystery. It's all around us. And I wanted to close with a Mary Oliver quote that I think sort of expresses this, and that is, whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, over and over announcing your place in the family of things. And so what is science worth? Well, I think science, as I said, is fundamentally about curiosity and it's about open-mindedness. And when I show those behaviors to another human, that's an expression of caring. I think science fundamentally cares too, but it's just not showing that care to a person, it's showing it to the entire universe. I think science fundamentally is a kind of love, and in that way it's critical to our survival. And that's my talk.
And I pass the golden checkbook to you. And tell us, what comes to mind? What might you spend your treasure on to support science?
I'm tempted to be a little bit impertinent and say, I really believe in process and democracy. I don't think any one person, me, Trump, anyone, should be making solely a decision about where vast sums of money go into research. I think it should be a democratic process. If I had to choose, I would give it to groups of people that were underrepresented in science. So women, people from countries with lower GDP, because I think that those groups have different ways of looking at things, and it's increasingly important to get them involved. So.
So I detect a little bit of a theme here, something about mathematics. Our next speaker is Vaishali Bokil from the Department of Mathematics. She is born in India, but an American citizen, and she has a particular passion for Western and classical Indian music and is learning to play the classical guitar. She loves to sing. But in her day job as a mathematician, she studies numerical analysis, uses numerical analysis in scientific computing to study electromagnetics, to study biology, epidemiology, the study of populations, how diseases spread over large areas and through networks, something similar that echoes what we just heard. So welcome, Vaishali.
Thank you, and thank you all for coming. Today I'm going to tell you about how mathematics can help us understand dynamics and change, whether you're looking at love dynamics or disease dynamics. And so we'll start today with a story. And the story is about Francis Petrarch, Italian poet and scholar, considered father of humanism and father of the Renaissance, who was the author of the Canzoniere, a collection of 366 poems that he wrote and dedicated to a woman who he called Laura. Now, Laura was a very beautiful and mysterious high society lady whom Petrarch met at the age of 23 and fell in love, and then spent the next 21 years writing all these poems about her that ranged from bouts of anguish to utter despair to complete ecstasy. Laura was married and rejected him, but the poems indicate that there was tensions between Laura and Petrarch that were of a passionate nature. Unfortunately, only some of the poems are dated. So in 1995, a literary scientist, Frederick Jones, in his book, The Structure of Petrarch and the Canzoniere, The Structure of Petrarch's Canzoniere, had a very interesting solution to the problem of how do we date all these 366 poems, which is an important literary question. And his solution was to grade the poems from on a scale of -1 to 1, where -1 indicated utter despair and +1 indicated complete ecstasy. And what he saw when he plotted these graded scores was that there was an oscillatory pattern, which he called Petrarch's emotional cycle, and it had a period of about 4 years. So along comes a mathematician, Rinaldi, and he looks at this oscillatory dynamics, and he sits down and writes down mathematical equations to describe the cyclical love dynamics between Laura and Petrarch. And what Rinaldi did was he used one of the greatest inventions of all time, calculus, feared by many, but revered by all. And he used a very important concept in the calculus, that the notion of rate of change, how quantities change continuously with time. And he used that concept to talk about the rate of change of Laura's and Petrarch's love for each other, which you can see on the left-hand side, L for Laura and P for Petrarch, and their love for each other and how it changes with time t. And he wrote down that these changes in their love is given by 3 different mechanisms with the 3 different terms here. The first set of terms from left to right, indicating, the negative terms indicating that if there was no feedback between Laura and Petrarch, then their love would die over time. And that the sustaining of the love or the antagonism between Laura and Petrarch had to do with how they reacted to each other. And these reactions were represented mathematically by R, the R terms, and also their appeal for each other, how attracted they were to each other. And these appeals were represented by the A terms. So now how do we mathematically figure out what is R and what is A? And so Rinaldi, the mathematician, went through these poems and sparsed all the information and found out that Petrarch's reaction to Laura was what we call in mathematics linear. The more antagonistic Laura was to Petrarch, the more despair he felt. And the more affection she showed for him, the more towards ecstasy he moved. And so the red line, which is Petrarch's reaction to Laura. But Laura's reaction to Petrarch was what we would call in mathematics highly nonlinear, in that she did encourage his love to some extent, but then there was a threshold to that encouragement. And as he moved towards ecstasy, her antagonism increased. And so you see the dip in the blue curve to the right. And she also derided his despair, but then when his despair increased, she was overwhelmed with pity, and that pity overshadowed her antagonism, and her affection for him increased, which is the increase of the blue curve to the left. And so Rinaldi took these patterns that he saw in the reactions displayed in the poems, and also did something similar for the appeal, put them into his mathematical equations, and then showed that the equation displayed patterns that were very similar to the graded patterns that were generated by Jones, as you can see here. So patterns are ubiquitous in nature, and they are displayed by seemingly random phenomena such as human emotions, the weather, and of course love. And what mathematics is so absolutely fantastic at is to understand and study these patterns and the mechanisms that cause them. Hannah Fry, a mathematician, in one of her recent books called Mathematics of Love, talks about the fact that the dynamics of escalating tensions between husband and wife is pretty much the same as the dynamics of escalating tensions between two countries headed towards war. So the next time you have a fight with your wife, think about that for a different perspective on life. And in fact, these mathematical equations, which are called differential equations, that Rinaldi created for the love dynamics between Laura and Petrarch, are quite similar to some famous equations known as the Lotka-Volterra equations for changing dynamics between predator and prey populations. And in fact, these equations, which are also differential equations, are based on the fact that if you collect data on how the populations of predator and prey oscillate, shown here for lynx and its prey, the snowshoe hare, they also show cyclical dynamics. And in fact, if you think of disease and pathogens as a predator, then it's not surprising that you see cyclical dynamics in the spread of an infectious disease over time. So I spend my time working on these differential equations as well. Mine are a little more complicated, but essentially that's also what I do. And so what mathematics gives us is a very powerful tool that we call abstraction, which is to say that whether you're looking at love or disease or what have you, once you quantify the information, once you write down equations for how these quantities change, it doesn't really matter anymore what the quantities mean. What matters is how these quantities change in relation to other quantities that are also changing simultaneously, and how you quantify all this information. And then, at the level of the mathematics, you're able to parse all the information and also perhaps predict the future. Of course, with the power of predicting the future comes the fact that there is a probability of failure to predict the right future. And so it is very important that we conduct this science in an ethical and responsible way and quantify all the uncertainties that go into this prediction so that our science is credible and relevant. So whether you're talking about love, whether you want to describe love, you want to describe the weather, you want to describe the fate of the universe, mathematics has tools, the sort of abstraction, that can help you analyze natural and social phenomena, and these tools are unparalleled. Thank you for listening.
So I ask you the same question. Unlimited money, a great treasure, what would you spend it on to support science?
Oh, without a doubt, education. We need people to be educated. If you want people to understand how credible and relevant science can be, we need people to understand. The uncertainties that I talked about in predictions, we need people to understand all that. And education will go a long way towards not calling our science fake science. though.
Great, thank you. Thank you. We're going to move away from mathematics for a few minutes. Never too far away, of course. Our next speaker is a fourth-generation Oregonian and a former entrepreneur who says he believes very strongly in the power of community, the transformative power of community and entrepreneurship to make a difference in the world. Eric Rosenfeld received his MBA from the Institute for Management Development in Lausanne, Switzerland, and has a degree in industrial engineering and American studies from Stanford. He is a co-founder of the Oregon Angel Fund. It sounds celestial, does it not? $42 million invested in 51 local startups, responsible for somewhere over 2,600 jobs in Oregon. A few accomplishments. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you, Nick. Hello, everyone. Consider all the wonderful exhibits we saw this morning, the demonstration projects, right, from carbon electronics and cell communication. Consider Sandra's talks about drugs from dirt and from the ocean. Consider all the wonderful research that's occurring at OSU and our other premier research institutions and the potential that research has. Consider the good work of Oregon State's Advantage Impact Program. And if you put all this together, the commercial and the societal potential of the research that's occurring in our state is exciting and it's immense and it's game-changing. But alas, the dollars are few. The resources are very few. About 10 years ago, my partners and I took up the challenge. How can we get more Oregonians investing in Oregonians? And if you think about it, we're famous here for shopping local, we're famous for eating local, but we're not so great at investing local. And state funding for our state's universities represents a declining share of our universities' budgets. So even our state is not so great at investing local. So we created the Oregon Angel Fund as a mechanism, as a vehicle to try to get our state's expertise and our state's capital organized and channeled into funding startups that could commercialize some of the innovations that are occurring in our state and to drive innovation, to create jobs, and to foster wealth creation locally here in Oregon. So here we are now 10 years into our experiment, and the Oregon Angel Fund has invested indeed over $40 million directly into 51 startups. Several of those startups have originated at Oregon State, and maybe a quarter of our portfolio we would consider truly science-based or intellectual property-based, innovation-based businesses that are part of our emerging economy. And our investors have plowed an additional $20 million into those same companies. So over $60 million of Oregon money has gone into startups that are growing and prospering here in our state. And those startups are now employing over 2,600 Oregonians, and 10 of those companies have exited already, and 8 of those teams are now investors themselves. These are entrepreneurs that have become investors in the Oregon Angel Fund themselves. And so in essence, what's occurring is this cycle of wealth creation and reinvestment locally in Oregon. And if you think about Silicon Valley or Seattle or other successful regions, that cycle of wealth creation and innovation is turning pretty rapidly. If you add up the market capitalization, the value of the companies that have started here through this effort, it exceeds $1.1 billion. So that's the value that's been created, $1.1 billion from this effort. Now, science-based startups are important for several reasons. One is they are part of our state's future economy, right? They're going to be an engine of growth. They export goods and services outside our region, so therefore importing wealth into our region. And science-based businesses have the ability to generate financial returns for our universities, our engines of innovation and education. And I'd like to talk about two innovations that have occurred here at Oregon State that we've had the privilege of being a part of that I think are pretty interesting to talk about. Here we go. If you think about our drive to generate renewable, sustainable energy, we're relying on solar and wind pretty much today. But there's some drawbacks. The sun is not always shining, and the wind is not always blowing. However, the ocean is always on, right? The heave and surge of the waves wherever you are is always on. In fact, there's more latent energy in our oceans than we need to power our entire planet. It's just untapped. So a group of people out of Oregon State, the WAVE Research Laboratory here, led by Ken Reinfrank and his team, have designed and developed wave energy harvesting buoys that are immense in size. This is 80 feet from top to bottom, that are designed to withstand the environment of the ocean. And the environment inside the ocean, if you think about the power density of the ocean, and if you think about all the salt, it's a pretty harsh, corrosive environment, probably harsher than some of the planets in our solar system. And for something to withstand the ocean is very difficult. And so they've been able to develop a design that can withstand all that. And Columbia Power Technologies, started here, has emerged to become the technology leader in our country in harvesting energy from the ocean. And they will be creating a utility scale project off the coast of Hawaii by the beginning of next year. And this has tremendous potential. And here is the size of the generator, the direct drive permanent magnet generator that they've had to design. It's over 30 feet tall. And again, this has originated here at OSU and has the potential to make a huge impact on our ability to create sustainable, renewable energy. Now, there are 20,000 people in Oregon who work at Intel, and probably another 20,000 whose jobs depend on the success of Intel. However, Intel and other leading semiconductor manufacturers have hit a wall. Moore's law is starting to break down. Semiconductors have hit a wall because you cannot produce the line width small enough to create semiconductors that are even cheaper, faster, less power intensive. And what's happening is imagine printing on an HP printer, and you're trying to produce something that's so small the lines blur together. So in essence, what will happen in the future, transistors will short circuit unless something is done. And it's a huge challenge facing the entire semiconductor industry. And Doug Kessler's laboratory here in sustainable materials chemistry has spun out several businesses, and Inpria is one such business led by Andrew Grenville here that is creating the next generation of photoresist that uses inorganic compounds, metal oxide chemistry, that allows for much tighter, finer line widths so that the march of progress in semiconductors and the Internet of Things can all be possible. And so if you think about that, the future of electronics and the semiconductor industry hinges to a degree on the innovations that are being developed here at Oregon State and being commercialized here in Corvallis. So you can say in essence that this cycle of local investment and exits and reinvestment of wealth is starting to turn. It's starting to occur here in Oregon, and we're proud to be a part of that. And no one can still predict the future, but now for the first time, at least we can try to invest in it.
And the question comes to you, perhaps with a portfolio to respond with. How would you spend your millions to support science?
Well, thank you for the millions. What I would love to do is to see more startups coming out of universities like Oregon State and U of O that are commercializing some of the great research and innovations here, and give them a chance to get started. It's expensive and time-consuming for a startup to get to market, and a lot of it, you just need patient capital, and if we don't invest in these businesses here, it's hard to imagine that other people will. So it's kind of up to us to get that going. So we would very much appreciate the chance to see more businesses get started and bringing the potential of this research to market. All right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
We're going to turn our attention now off our shores. We're going to turn our attention with Francis Chan to marine biology and marine ecology. Some of you may know about his work with the Partnership for Interdisciplinary Studies of Coastal Oceans, PISCO. He is a marine ecologist who studies ocean ecosystems through chemistry. How do carbon dioxide, how do oxygen levels affect the nearshore ecology, and how are those systems changing with changes in currents and climate? He tells me that on another level, he is hoping to find an unreserved campsite for the solar eclipse on August 21st. And he would just as soon never follow Jane Lubchenco as a speaker.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. Well, thanks, everyone. And so today I want to share with you an example of, I think, what are some of the things that can happen when we do, in fact, share our science. So this picture is what my day job looks like on a great day. So we're out there, the ocean is not angry with us. I've got a boat full of instruments, and we're ready to sample the ocean. We're about to track changes in oxygen and carbon dioxide. You know, this is best day ever stuff. Now, as fun as that looks, I have to admit that, you know, when it comes down to it, what I do should really be pretty boring. You think about it, the ocean is vast, and carbon dioxide and oxygen levels in the ocean, well, that shouldn't change all that much. Sure, if I measure it and track it over hundreds and hundreds of years, but in my lifetime, you know, there's nothing that should be really exciting or interesting that's happening. But when I first arrived at OSU, I stumbled into the middle of a mystery. We were getting reports that marine life were actually dead marine life was washing up along our shores. And it was quite alarming, because the fishermen were up in arms because they were pulling up crab pots that were filled with dead crabs. They'd never seen this before. And luckily, we had a research cruise planned that week, and we went out there, and we thought, hey, we could figure this out. We're going to find a culprit to see what's killing marine life on our shore. And we did. You know, on that very first cruise, we found out that the culprit was oxygen, or the lack of it. There just wasn't enough oxygen in our coastal water. The crabs actually suffocated in the fishermen's pots. But that was the easy part, understanding what happened. The harder part was understanding why was oxygen so low. Where did it all go? So it was the case of the missing oxygen. And to be honest, I thought I had it figured out. Because on that first day when I was out, I noticed that, wow, it was incredibly calm. It was just spectacularly calm. And if you go out to the coast, this is what you expect, right? This is the Oregon coast. It's a windy, burly place. But that day, it was just flat, calm, glassy. And I thought, aha, I know what happened. It's just like when I forget and unplug my son's fish tank and the air bubbler's not working. The ocean, that local spot in the ocean, it was so calm that it ran out of oxygen. And you know, this was around the time when the movie The Perfect Storm was out. I'm not sure you guys saw it. And I thought I had the best title for a scientific paper. It was going to be The Perfect Calm. You know, I thought it was going to write itself. And you know, to be honest, I was really comfortable thinking about this, what I was seeing as a really local, kind of one-time problem. I was quite comfortable thinking of that. But what I didn't realize is that I didn't have all the pieces of the puzzle, because we went back out to sea the next week and the week after. And what happened? Well, the winds picked up. Well, the oxygen should have gone back up. But no, it stayed low. So much for the perfect calm. And when it was all, and as more pieces of information came in, it was really clear that this local low oxygen or dead zone that we were studying, it wasn't so local after all. Because I had colleagues on ocean-going research vessels miles and miles offshore that could trace the low oxygen zone that we were studying all the way out to the edge of the continental shelf. So the paper that we did end up publishing really describes how this low oxygen zone that was affecting our backyard ecosystem, really it was the first step that signaled changes in ocean climate. And the lesson to me was that local surprises can have important global drivers. So keep that in mind. But that's not the end of the story, because just as we thought we were making headway, explaining this issue of ocean changes in oxygen to the public and decision makers, the challenge of ocean acidification erupted. Now, what is ocean acidification? Well, the ocean has been doing this incredible job for us. It literally takes in 1 out of 4 carbon dioxide molecules that we emit into the atmosphere. It's all doing this in the background, free of cost to us. This has been great. But the problem is, when the ocean takes up more CO2, it's taking up so much CO2 that its very basic chemistry is changing. And it's changing in a way that makes it much harder for marine life like corals to build a skeleton or oysters to make a shell. And the trouble for us on the Oregon coast is that because we have these low oxygen zones out there, well, in low oxygen zones, carbon dioxide is actually naturally rich. We have very high CO2 levels. So the future that we're looking at is one where we have high CO2 levels, very close to a tipping point where we can start to literally dissolve shells. So we can do this. We can take seawater from Oregon right now, put a shell in it and watch it dissolve. So the future that we're looking at is what's been termed a breathless and sour ocean. So my colleagues and I want to say we in the OSU sense, there are lots of colleagues working on this at OSU, we've suddenly found ourselves in the epicenter of this global challenge of ocean acidification. And we were feverishly putting sensors out in the ocean, trying to figure out what's happening. We were training a new generation of graduate students who really want to work on this problem. And my colleagues were working with the oyster growers to try to keep them in business. And at times it really felt like too big of a challenge. We really felt like we need to be engaging the public and decision makers on the science that we're finding. And it literally was science that was worth spreading. So we started talking to people, anyone who would listen, Rotary clubs, local schools. And eventually we talked to state legislators, we talked to the governor, and we talked to members of Congress. And it turns out they were listening. And they wanted to make sure that they didn't want Oregon to be behind the curve on this. But the problem was we didn't really know what ahead of the curve looked like. So Oregon, California, Washington, and BC got together and convened a panel of 20 scientists to figure out what was happening, what's at risk, and what should they do about it. I was asked to co-chair the panel, and I thought, great, yeah, science should have a seat at the table. And my second reaction was like, oh my God, they gave us 20 seats at the table, we would not blow this. In a sense, can we take new ocean science and turn that into new ocean policy? That's very daunting. So what do we find? What was our messages back? First and foremost, this isn't a bucket list problem. This isn't ocean acidification. It's not a problem for my son when he retires and wants to go on that scuba diving trip to some exotic coral reef. Ocean acidification is happening right now. It's happening in our backyard, in our ocean, some of the hardest working ecosystems in the business. And the second is that it's not just a problem for oyster lovers. I mean, not everybody likes oysters, because the science that we're seeing every week is showing that more and more organisms are being affected by ocean acidification. And the list is growing, and it now includes things like rockfishes and Dungeness crabs. Now, what has come of this? And I'll end quickly. Well, California quite literally took our report, and they turned it into 2 pieces of legislation so that state won't be caught flat-footed with the changes in with the changes that are coming from ocean acidification. And last December, I attended a meeting where the governors of Oregon, California, and Washington unveiled the International Alliance to Combat Ocean Acidification, where they're using West Coast leadership to help other municipalities and other nations to bring up action plans. And closer to home, there's this, Oregon Senate Bill 1039. This bill is tasking the state to make it official policy to look at ocean acidification. Now, this is not the answer. This bill is not the answer to everything that we need. But what it is that it's a mechanism, it makes it an official policy that science has a seat at the table so that the actions that we take into the future as a state is informed by the best knowledge possible. And actually some of the best knowledge is going to have to come from OSU because it's going to be in the bill. So this is an example where I think sometimes there is science that is definitely worth spreading. Thank you.
So with your millions, are you going to buy a ship?
No.
What would you do?
You know, I think I'll take half the money, because I like to give it to maybe just half the nations or half the states, and let's run an experiment to see where investment in education, is going to be beneficial. Because I think we want to have a clear answer to that.
All right. Thank you very much. Well, we know in reality nature bats last, right? Well, but today Brent Steel will bat last for us. Brent is a native of the Pacific Northwest. He is a skier, he is a hiker, a fly fisher, an outdoor enthusiast. He loves clean water, clean mountain air, protected natural areas, and he, in his day job, is the director of the interdisciplinary graduate program in public policy here at OSU. So he's going to bridge from science to the decisions we make around public policy. Brent?
All right, thank you. Thank you, Sastry, for letting a political scientist crash the event. So obviously I'm going to talk a little politics here. There's two things that we've been heavily involved here at Oregon State University that have everything to do with getting science involved in the policy process. And so I'm going to talk about both of them. The first one is going to be more about civic literacy, and the second one is going to be more about post-normal science approaches that we've been on the forefront with here at Oregon State University. When I got involved in civic literacy when my wife Becky is here and our son moved to moved to Oregon in 1990. I'm originally from Washington State, she's from Oregon, so we were familiar with the initiative system somewhat. But we moved back here in the summer of 1990, and we heard about this Measure 5 thing that was on the ballot. And so, we're going to have to vote on this and have an opinion. So we went to a PTA meeting and heard a discussion on this. And, alternative facts aren't new. They've been around a long time. And so we heard a lot of alternative facts and narratives about what Measure 5 would do. And I became a little concerned, so we started doing our homework. And we found out that probably wasn't going to be so good for K through 12 and higher education. And so I got together with the Extension Service and an economist that works in the Extension Service, Bruce Weber, who's an expert on public economics, and we decided to do something new. We put together a white paper on Measure 5, just the facts, not pro, not con, but just the facts of what could happen. And we put this out, and I'll be honest with you, it was very brave Extension Service to do something like this, because this could be a political hot potato. But we went through peer review and everything, and we got this thing out. And of course, Measure 5's passed, and pretty much everything we had in our white papers has come to pass at K through 12 and higher education. But during this particular process, our work got noticed by a new fledgling organization that was called Project VoteSmart. And Project VoteSmart was a collection of bipartisan politicians and civic activists and academics, including former presidents Carter and Ford. And they were lamenting the state of politics in the United States at that time, and they said there needs to be a place where people get unbiased facts about where politicians stand on the issues. And so we entered in discussions with them here at Oregon State University, and the provost at that time, Roy Arnold, we got him involved in this process. In fact, we got his daughter involved as an intern originally in this, and we found space on campus to start this organization. So we started the organization in the basement of Stagg Hall before the nice remodel, so we had a little asbestos and things hanging from the pipes. And we got together interns and volunteers, and there's probably some volunteers in this room here today. And we had a 1-800 number. And so we're on all the major news stations. We broadcast the 1-800 number, because this is before the internet. So this is like 1990. And so we had our students in the basement of Stagg Hall, so we had reams of paper down here like this and telephones. And so they're going through, someone would call on the phone and say, well, how did my senator vote on this? And so we would go through and look at the votes. And then, who's he taking money from? So we had the Federal Election Commission data, so we would do this. So this was going on for a long time. But it was very influential. We had millions of telephone calls. Finally, we grew to a point where we couldn't work on campus anymore. We were too big. And so we moved to a dude ranch in Montana about 10 years later. And we've been operating out of Montana for 10 years. And we've kind of outgrown that now. So we've moved now to Des Moines, Iowa at Drake University, because we thought it was a strategic location with the caucuses. Caucuses usually start 2 years ahead of time there, but it's a wonderful organization. It started here at Oregon State University, and the theme I have up here is civic literacy. You can have the best science that there is, and we have some awesome presentations here and really cool stuff. But unless, you got the policy part of it down, it might not come to fruition here. And so I just threw a couple things up here like disconnects, and I'm not getting partisan here, this is the facts. So we got reports that 97% of climate scientists say climate change is happening. The public right now, this is a 2016 poll by Pew. There's lots of polls on this. We do polls like this. The public loves science. They want scientists involved. 66% of the public last year believe that climate scientists should have a major role in policy. And at the same time, there's some research out now using Project VoteSmart and stuff where 182 of our elected officials don't believe in climate change. They're climate deniers. And that's either in speeches that they give or votes that they take. Okay? So coming back to this right here, I would urge you to go to this particular site. This was started at Oregon State University. I'm still on the executive board. We still have connections to Oregon State University. I'd like the quote by James Madison here, if you look at that. But we're at a time in our history right now, an unprecedented time right now, and we really need people. It's not Project VoteSmart's not so much about voter turnout. It's informed voter turnout. Whatever it is, wherever your political ideology or your partisanship is, we want to have people to have access to free, factual, unbiased information on candidates and elected officials to all Americans. And so I'd urge you to go to the website if you can, or answer your question, okay? And then the other thing that's been going on campus, this is a little bit related, a quick example here. We are the envy of other universities in the policy field. When I go to meetings, we do things here that you don't see at most other universities. I'm on the faculty in 7 different colleges now. I'm working with nuclear engineering now on a couple of classes and a couple of projects. That doesn't happen everywhere else. And so one of the things we've been doing here is we've been calling it post-normal science, and I started this when H.J. Andrews, long-term ecological research site, working with them, working with foresters, working with soil scientists, sociologists are involved, political scientists are involved, and we've been looking at society and science projects down there, but basically getting scientists out of the laboratory, working with managers, working with the public, working with policymakers to solve important problems. And so one example, we're calling these knowledge to action networks now. We have them in the Central Oregon, a fire project I just worked on. We have them going on the coast. We have them going up in the mountains now, down in the H.J. Andrews. And so I've got a link up there just for an example of this. But in the policy circles now, this is being called the Oregon way, that we get together with watershed councils, collaborative governance, post-normal science, KTANs, and that we're working together to solve problems and with interdisciplinary faculty, working with the community, working with the citizens. So it's pretty awesome. And so I'm hoping we're going to keep that label Oregon way in the future. So thank you.
Yeah, so one quick question for you.
Okay.
What's the big political campaign? Is it lobbyists? Is it campaign stops around the country? How are you going to spend your money?
Voter literacy.
Voter literacy, okay.
Project VoteSmart.
All right, great. Thank you. So now we're going to shift gears. It's going to be your turn to ask questions, to ask the people up on the panel here that you've heard speak, and find out from them, what should we do to stand up for science? What's the next step? It's great to sit here and talk and share stories and to hear his things and see beautiful pictures and be inspired. That's important. It's part of the community building that we need to do together. But taking this after, if you're going to go to the March for Science, taking this next step, what do we do? How do we practically stand up for science? Do we run for office? Do we get on social media? I know sometimes I bring up Twitter or Facebook to scientists and say, oh, I'm already busy with all sorts of reports and proposal writing and classes and teaching, and you want me to do one more thing? I get it. People are very busy. But how do we engage with the public? How do we engage with the decision-making machinery? There are many, many opportunities to do that. So you may have questions about how we should accomplish this for the long term. What are the steps going forward to make this a reality? I'd like to invite the speakers up to sit here on the, I guess this is the dais, the concrete, whatever we call it, the platform. And we will, I know it feels a little uncomfortable being so close, but for camera purposes, this is all being recorded. We need you to sit there. And I'm going to use my privilege as the moderator to gather the first question from Oregon State University President, Dr. Ed Ray.
Thanks for the surprise. Very simple question. I had a conversation some years ago with Chris Johns, who's a graduate of Oregon State, was at the time the publisher of National Geographic. And we talked about the anti-science mood in the electorate. And he talked about wanting to do an issue on climate change, which his editorial board said don't do because half the people who we want to buy issues hate, are on one side or the other, and we want to sell as many magazines as possible, so it's too hot a topic, don't do it. Anyway, the long and short of it is what they did, and it was their best-selling issue, is they found people who were wonderful writers and understood enough of the science to connect with scientists to then tell narratives about people, where they lived and how climate change had changed their lives and what the future looked like for them. And so a question I have is, we're here to teach and educate. Are there things we can do in our curriculum, whether it's create a major, minors, whatever? How do we build bridges so we get students, for example, who are great storytellers in creative writing, whatever, to become sufficiently immersed in the science that we now have advocates who can go out there as graduates and help educate the general populace about the importance of science and what are facts and what are alt facts.
Okay, who wants to take that one first? How do we structure this initiative to communicate more effectively? Don't all speak at once.
I'll just say, from not being a member of the faculty, but being a fan of the faculty, I would encourage a couple things. One is systems thinking that's interdisciplinary, because a lot of these challenges involve several disciplines, and you spoke about that. Several of our speakers talked about that. And making sure that the research and the teaching that we're doing here is in service of something that's very practical and the things that people are passionate about, right? And historically, science has had this bent towards the fearless and relentless pursuit of knowledge, sometimes just for knowledge's sake. And that's always important. And if research universities don't do it, no one will. But as a research university, I feel like it's our obligation to make sure that we are tackling these issues and making sure that our graduates are really well prepared. And I would love to see more internships, more industry-university partnerships, industry people spending time here, and graduate students and other students spending time working on these problems. And so I feel that there's a huge role for the university doing systems and interdisciplinary.
Well, following that, so what we've been doing is, in the policy world, our program is very interdisciplinary, and we encourage our students to take not only our policy classes from economic sociology, political science, anthropology, but also have them taking courses in forestry, oceanography, geosciences, and then we have internships, a required internship or practicum, so we send them out on the field, and then we also do applied research projects, so we partner with communities that have a particular need. So last year was the Oregon Coastal Management Association, Zoning Association, that we worked with to come up with a strategic plan. So interviewing people on the coast, doing some surveys, analyzing data, but just getting a feel for on the ground for how they can really help people, how complex issues are. So that's what we've been trying to do.
Say something. So we're talking right now about internationalizing the curriculum. And I think introducing that international aspect to the curriculum, talking about history, geography, creating empathy. I think empathy is very important. understanding different perspectives, different views, having those different views, understanding them, and then going out and communicating those with the public would be very important.
I would also add that the College of Science just awarded SURE summer funds for undergrad researchers. And I think 32 were awarded, and these are undergrad researchers who stay over summer and they get excited for research and they bring it home to their communities, they bring it home to their families, and they do this early in their studies. And that's something you see, they're being excited and they bring it to communities, they talk about it, they stay here all summer. It's fantastic to see. And more programs like that would really engage, I guess, science earlier in the curriculum.
I think maybe making science classes, particularly math classes, a safer space for artists. As Vishali demonstrated, there's ways of teaching calculus that embrace the whole human, and I think that there's untapped potential there, so that folks who are the storytellers are also sort of have access to those technical skills. I think that's an exciting frontier.
I'll say that, when we think about working together, putting people who really have different worldviews together, well, we need some more that always sounds great, transdisciplinary work, but we need real concrete examples of those narratives where, what did happen? And, as a marine scientist, it's exciting because, there's a Marine Studies Initiative and we're gonna try that experiment. And it's that systems thinking because, why aren't we solving that problem? Is it that we lack the science? Is it that we lack the policy, or is it that we lack the communications? I think we want to attack it from that perspective.
Thank you all. Let me put a quick pitch in here for those of you in this community who might be interested in OSU science communication. There is an informal network of OSU science communicators on campus. We meet 2-3 times a term. If you're interested in being involved with that, see me afterwards or email me, nick.houtman@oregonstate.edu, and I'll connect you with the group. So if you have questions, raise your hand. I'll call on you. I'll have to repeat the question for our online audience. We're also taking questions from remote locations. So let's go to the first one over here. Excellent question from a high school science teacher. How can Oregon State University assist students in schools who are concerned and upset about the state of the world? Yeah? Right. Thank you. Great question. Who would like to tackle that one?
Well, I'll give you one example. So ocean acidification, this thing that I described, there are students here that are actually developing high school curriculum modules so that they can take what we're finding about ocean acidification and turning that into a lesson for students. Now, the really interesting part is that it's not just about here's the doom and gloom, this is the world declining, but we're trying to, actually we're making a video on the successes, the local actions. So I have citizen scientists who monitor OA with me. They send me the sensors back and forth so I don't have to drive up and down the coast. And there are people, the hatchery owners, they found workaround. We're looking at ways to build a breaded oyster. So there are all these positive solutions that are generated locally that I think we want to get other students thinking about what is the next solution.
How do you share that with
There's an MRM student that's going to be going to high schools locally. Yeah.
So connecting students with faculty and programs that take our faculty to schools, to communities throughout the state, and even more broadly. That's crucial.
I'll pass this one maybe.
Anyone else want to tackle that one? Okay. Other questions? That's a great question. How do we bring the deniers and the people who know facts together in a respectful dialogue and hear each other? Yeah, it's a difficult question, and whole books have been written about this. Would anybody like to tackle that question about how we bring people with different perspectives together?
So I just finished a book on this, and it's not just climate change, though, but different, because on the far left and the far right, you have people that pick and choose the science they like, and it's a real difficult thing to do. And so some scientists, like the Ehrlichs, have been focusing on moderates to portray their message. Others have been focusing on framing. Political scientists have been looking at framing, how you frame, the particular issue, long-term, short-term, seriousness of it, and then the types of language that you use. And then there's some research that suggests that even when someone is so far out or ideological on the issue that when you try to correct the misinformation, you even might make it worse. So it's a really complicated situation. I don't know if that answered your question.
How do we bring the climate change skeptics and the scientists together? So it's a long-term question, and maybe you can chat about this afterwards. Yes. So a similar question, even earlier than the first one that was asked. How do we reach the younger children and the teachers to bring science to them effectively?
My guess is everybody at this university believes in climate change. You've got to get outside the university.
Yeah. Who would like to tackle that one?
One thing, I'm sorry. I think a lot about this. There's a book by there's a book by Russell Dalton. It's called The Good Citizen, and he took decades and decades and decades of survey research looking at civil society in the United States. And previous research has said, well, young people aren't involved, they don't care, they don't vote, blah, blah, blah. And Russell Dalton took that data and he broke it down to different types of civil society. So formal, which is voting and stuff, and then community activism. And what he found out is that millennials are more involved in their community than any cohort that we have ever analyzed in the US where we have data for. And getting them involved, like internships, community events, I mean, they're heavily involved, but it's trying to make the connection into the bigger issues like national climate change policy. And so his argument in there is that we start at that level first, but then we need to make the link to them that you can't just do things locally, you have to be thinking up at this other level. Well, but it actually, that research gives me a lot of hope that in the long run that things are going to get better. But once again, it's another tough question. Just another tough question.
I would also add, we had some, exquisite demos here today, and those are made usually by OSU students and some faculty, and they go out in the community and they excite people outside in schools from really small, even kindergarten, up to going to OMSI in Portland and showing their science, bringing it down to like a game maybe or an interactive, little experience there. And that's something I guess all of us do in the College of Science. We go out and try to engage, but we can do more for sure, and I think we should.
And as a parent, I've gotten together with other parents and we've organized math circles and we've had OMSI come and do science programs for children here. And I think that's something that everyone can get involved in. In the mathematics department, we've had programs I've been involved in a program for middle school girls to come here and then learn mathematics. And so we certainly, do what we can, and I think everyone needs to get more engaged.
I was thinking of a TED Talk I saw by the singer Raffi, and he asked this provocative question, which was, how many of you as children felt that you were truly appreciated for your whole self? And his point was, or what he was advocating, I think, was continuing to improve our education system so that children learn to listen to their intuition and learn to value themselves. And I think one of the amazing things that can happen inside the scientific community is I can, in some sense, approach a senior colleague and say, I've analyzed the same data and come to a different conclusion. And disagreement is, cordial disagreement is right at the heart of science. And I think that there's a way in which that could be instructed younger by teaching children to listen to themselves, listen to their intuition, and giving them good experiences that they can, a sense of an intimate relationship with reality, I think maybe is good for dispelling alternative facts. Yeah.
I think we have time for one more quick question. Yeah. Yep. Okay. Do you have a question for our panel, or okay? Thank you. Thank you. Well, take that seriously. In fact, we have talked about that, but I'm glad that you emphasize that and remind me of why that's important. Sastry, your turn.
So for some of the questions, I do want to say that we do have Discovery Days. We bring in young kids. We have Discover Scientists within. That's a program also bringing in 7th and 8th graders, especially young girls, young ladies. So we have one place for College of Science, but I understand, I hear your comment about having for the entire university. I know you're getting hungry, so I'll just have a few more remarks before we'll break. But one thing that I was just sitting there and I was just like a proud parent, I was just beaming with pride to see the passion of our faculty, how excited about their research and how passionate they're about. I was just really, really proud of them. I mean, you know how wonderful that is for our students. They are committed to our students' success and they take their passion to the classroom. And that's something that I really, really appreciate as well in terms of how beneficial Oregon State students are to have this wonderful faculty. Again, I hope you enjoyed these science word spreading talks from some of our top science minds at OSU. I also want to thank our sponsors and the speakers and Nick Houtman for hosting the discussion and Q&A. And also, you may not see that John is up there organizing all the media as well as the live webcast for this. There are lots of people that are involved, including Stacy Simonich, C here, Mahela, and Debbie for our marketing. So let's give them all a big hand. Yeah, also I want to thank all of you for taking the time to join us in this conversation on a Saturday morning. I really very much appreciate your support. And I hope that we have infused you with enough science to spread to continue the momentum of today into the future. Science has helped all of us throughout history, and we must renew our commitment to science so it can serve us well into the future. Again, as I said, before we go into the pizza and maybe even go exercise in the downtown later, let me make a few closing remarks. And also, I'm supposed to do a drawing here. So maybe I'll ask somebody to pick one winner.
Sure.
So.
Seems to be a randomized process.
Okay. Nancy Gill. Yay. You have a nice backpack of goodies in there.
Thank you so much.
Good. Congratulations. So remember, every one of you is really a scientist. Every one of you also can make a difference. I mean, I'm sure every day you hypothesize, you collect data, test your hypothesis, and make a decision. It may be as simple as whether you should take a rain jacket or not. Of course, you have to in Oregon. Whether the soup you're making is done or not, or whether to invest in your hard-earned money in a particular stock or invest in science, what medicines to prescribe or to take, or how you want to keep our planet healthy for future generations. Your wife, your husband, your partner, or your parent or child, or a sibling, who may be a scientist or a mathematician, may be working at OSU, or at EPA, or at HP, or at a new startup company, or experimenting at your own home or in a garden, they need your support. I need your support. And we need your hugs as we discover things that help us have a healthy people living on a healthy planet in a healthy economy. Science really has no borders. So regardless of what accent I speak in or what color I am, we're all united in our goals to discover and innovate in order for the quality of life for everyone and for everything on this planet be better for now, and more importantly, for the future. We are here to educate and build leaders in science, provide an opportunity for everyone, I mean everyone, to reach their fullest potential. We want to strive for excellence, enhance diversity, and foster harmony through our One Science community. As President Ray would say, the best of OSU is yet to come. We are marching on to make a positive difference by laying a foundation in basic science. We are training problem solvers. We are building leaders in science and developing technologies that will help all of us. Many of you are now asking, what can I do to help? I invite you to continue the conversation and become a partner and a part of our One Science community to promote the importance and the value of science to your friends, family, your neighbors, colleagues, of course, to your elected officials. Each one of you can make a difference for science and the scientists by doing at least insist on making use of data, science, and facts in making decisions or public policies. Advocate and invest in science. Hold all of us and our policymakers accountable for our ethics and high standards. Finally, let me end with a request. As I mentioned about science being invisible, we scientists are also at times invisible and may feel alone. So please make it a habit, or please make it a point to hug a scientist every day. While you hug, maybe give a few pats on their back. Go make a difference. Go bees! Let's go have some pizza.